Hi, welcome to DA Australia. We're going to have a little quick tech talk today about throttle setup. In essence, we see some pretty bad setups and see some pretty good ones too, but just to outline one of the better ways to set your throttle up to get it so that it's linear and not all one-sided and in need of a curve. Mostly you'll find that most of the throttles now can be quite linear. We see a lot of guys chasing a more linear throttle by changing header length and so forth, and a lot of times it doesn't turn out to be that. It ends up being just a bad throttle setup. In essence, what you really want to do is trying to get an even balance on your endpoint adjustments so that your throttle servo has somewhere between 80% high, 80% low, 100 high, 100 low is perfect. That's pretty ideal. But what we see more often than not is something like 40% low and 120% high. Now that kind of imbalance will give you a really bad throttle curve. It'll make it slow at one end and fast at the other, and it centers quite differently. So you'll end up chasing your tail trying to get a good throttle curve, and your throttle will not feel anywhere near linear. Now if Mark comes in, I'll just show you quickly. We have a quick setup, and this is a bit of an exaggeration because we've got pretty big arms on it, but to give you an idea, we have one of these servos set at 100% on both sides of the endpoint, and one set at 40% one side, 120 the other. Now it's got 2-inch arms on it, and now regardless of the servos, these are Spectrum servos, it makes no difference whose brand it is, this will end up being the same. Now as we transition through the throttle, this is the center position of your throttle stick. Now if I go down to the low position, you can see there's a bit of a difference in the endpoint setup. Now we come back to center, you'll see after we go through center, the other one travels way faster, and it's not center. That's half your problem. So what you find as you transition through the throttle, you'll come up to center, there's nothing at the bottom, it's doing very little, then at the top end, it's real fast. What you want is what's on this chap here, on your left hand side. You want that an even balance on both sides from center. So if you can get somewhere between 100% and 100% or 180%, is pretty well spot on the money. Now if you're only 5% out, don't stress too much, it's not a big difference, but ideally you want them fairly balanced. What you don't want is what this side's got. As you can see the transition, and now I'm not changing the speed of the stick anywhere here, you'll just see that it slows down quite dramatically at one end and has to catch up at the other end. You don't want that. That makes your throttle transition pretty poor, and you'll be chasing it, trying to get the throttle curve. Now your radio can only do so much. As technically au fait as most of the radios are now, you certainly want to set your mechanical linkage up the best you can before you start playing with throttle curves. Now when you're setting your throttle up, my preferred servo is a JR8231. It's a great digital servo. A lot of people don't like it because it's a little bit expensive, but reality is this is a precise servo. It will give you consistent idle, and we see a lot really bad idling and people with inconsistent stalling problems, and it turns out to be just a crappy cheap servo. From my perspective, it's worth spending a little bit extra money on a good quality servo that's going to give you a consistent idle. This is one of them. Regardless of brand loyalties, I don't care either way which one you choose, but choose a good digital servo. This one's fast, it's precise, I like them a lot. This is a good servo. Now when you're setting your linkage up, I tend to prefer using something like the Sullivan carbon rod. Now this has got a slight impregnation of carbon, and its thermal properties are really good. It doesn't expand and contract. It's an excellent choice, and it's reasonably flexible. Now over a reasonable short area, this is a really good choice. There's other ways of doing it. You might have your clear preferences, but I like something with a bit of flex in it. Now ideally when you're setting your throttle up, what you're ideally looking for is when you take your measurements for your push rod, from the center of your spline to the center of your throttle rod, your throttle linkage here, that should be the length. As you can see on here, the travel on either side of center is exactly the same. So if you're thereabouts from center of the throttle spline to the center of your throttle servo spline, that's your measurement. That's a good place to start, and you'll get a pretty equal control throw on each side of your servo. Hope this has helped a little bit. If you have any more questions, please give us a call. We're happy to help.